Welcome to the Money to the Masses podcast, putting you in control of your finances. It's a good thing podcasts are free, as this one isn't worth a penny. Here are your hosts, Damien Fahy and Andy Leeks.
Now, Damien, before we get on with this week's podcast, you had something quickly to say about our sponsors.
Yeah, we've got a new sponsor, Money Farm, and Money Farm are an online investment advisor and one of the biggest digital wealth management companies in Europe. So a big thank you to them for sponsoring the podcast. Now, Money Farm create portfolios to maximise long-term returns using ETFs to make incredibly cheap portfolios. And you even get the first £10,000 of your portfolio invested without any charge from Money Farm. And if you enter the code MTTM20K into the box when you sign up, you get the first £20,000 of your portfolio invested and run by moneyfarm.com without any charge.
Great stuff. On with this week's show. Hello and welcome to episode 106 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert as always, Damien Fahy, and me, Andy Leeks. Damien, welcome back. We had a break.
We did. We had an impromptu break. God, I missed you, Andy. I think... do you know what? I've been so excited about doing the podcast today because we did have an impromptu break. It's not an excuse, but I just had loads of things happen at once. It wasn't Andy, it was me.
It sounds like a relationship, doesn't it? It's not you, it was me.
As soon as I said that, I just thought, yeah, it sounds so naff. But it wasn't you, Andy, it's me. Various things, like lots to do with Money to the Masses, like snowed under, and then one or two medical emergencies within the family, so it caused something had to give, and unfortunately it was the podcast. But what was good is that so many of you got in touch saying, where's the podcast? And I've just, before this podcast, we've recorded this, 10 minutes before, I was on, there's a chat function. Do you remember I've talked about the chat function that's on T20 Investor? If you go onto the Money to the Masses website and in T20 Investor, and you look at, there's a page that tells you all about it and how well we're doing and how much money we're making and the features, etc., etc. A window pops up and says, are there any questions I can help you with? And it's got my smiley little face on there. And that does genuinely link to me. So if you were to type anything in there, I get a notification on my laptop, my mobile phone, whatever have you, and you'll be talking to me. And somebody did that. I mean, that happens a lot. Most days I have a few people do it and they're talking about various things, and they're asking me about 80/20. And the person who was asking me did say, when's the next podcast? So even just moments before we recorded this, someone asked me. But they actually inspired something I'm going to talk about as well. I asked them, is there any topics, by the way, you'd like to see covered on the podcast? And they threw one at me, and just to show how spontaneous we are, Andy. And for the moment, I'm going to mention one of them.
Is it spontaneous or is it lack of content? And thank goodness we got something.
No, I prefer to be spontaneous. Actually, this week, I think I've got the opposite problem. I've been sitting down thinking about what we're going to talk about, and there's so much that something might have to give. And I'm also looking at this because afterward, just to give you insight into how we do the podcast, Andy does a brilliant job of editing, as many of you have previously confirmed. And then Andy will text me, usually on a Saturday, saying, have you got a title for me for the podcast? And I didn't come up with a title. And it's perhaps a roundabout sort of way to do it, the wrong way round, because I do the title after the podcast. And I'm looking at what I'm talking about, and I'm thinking, I'm not sure what the title's going to be this week. So there's a bit of everything. But what's good is there's going to be something for everybody.
Maybe, I mean, listeners will already know what the title is because they'd have clicked on it and they're listening to it. But maybe it'll be Damien's All Sorts. We did have once, it could be Damien's All Sorts. And just think about, we did have Damien's Little Nuggets before, which sounded a little bit euphemistic. But yeah.
So anyway, Andy, what have you been up to the last 2 weeks?
Do you know what, Damien? Not much. I've just been sort of pining for the day that you and I get back together with a couple of mics and a brew and we can talk about money. So, yeah, sad as it is, I haven't been up to much. I've been just cracking on with a day job and, children, Halloween parties. Oh, I did have my youngest daughter's birthday party as well while we were off. That was good fun.
Yeah, that's always hard work. I think children's birthday parties they should be incredibly simple, but they just end up being incredibly stressful. And you try and do that, again, money saving thing where you think, oh, we'll do it ourselves and we're not going to pay to have it done in one of these soft play areas. And whenever I've seen anybody do that or heard anybody do that, it still seems to me that you spend a fortune because you're having to replicate something that isn't. Whatever happens, you spend a lot of money on a kid's party.
We spent an absolute fortune, and instead of making the teas and coffees, I thought there'd be a little shortcut here. So I went up the local Costa and got a round of, 15 drinks in. Cost me about 35 quid. So I won't be doing that again. What have you been up to anyway this week?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things I've been up to is, actually this is quite interesting from a purely money to the masses insider thing. I've been doing a lot of logo work for T20 Investor, because now T20 Investor is really growing, and we've got to a size where it needs its own identity. So as much as it is very much embedded in money to the masses, it needs its own logo, if that makes sense. So it's a standard, because some people do come across T20 Investor via money to the masses, but in an isolated way. Do you know what that means? They're not necessarily podcast listeners or newsletter subscribers, and so we got the guy who actually made our original logo for money to the masses and did the branding to come and look at T20. And do you know what? It's amazing. He's brilliant, and it's amazing anyway about people who are designers, the amount they can do with just a simple word, T20 Investor. For me, you just think, oh, it's different fonts or just mash it up a bit. But it came back with loads of different ideas. So if you are an T20 investor, you are likely to get, in the coming week or so, probably the short list of designs that we've come up with, and asking people's opinion, what they think. Because there's never a right or wrong answer, is there? You just want to see what you're trying to portray various different things about the product in an image, and it's a different world to what I'm used to. Is there anybody out there who is after a graphic designer or something, then get in touch, because I can point you in the direction of the guy we use. He's very good and very talented. So yeah, that's one of the things. That's quite interesting, actually. A different sphere to money, if that makes sense, and something that I like to see other people's skill sets.
Good. Okay, so I suppose we're best at some point move on to the money stuff. What have we got coming up? You said it was a bit of a mishmash.
Well, it wasn't. There is a kind of a running theme, but we're going to do a piece around not being ripped off when it comes to shopping, spending some money, buying stuff online, not in a scam way, but just actually be able to get a good value for money.
Don't get done, get Damien.
Yeah. Yeah, if we just want to rip off a TV programme. On that, there's something very similar to a programme on TV that was based around that, but with a burglar. Okay, I'll just leave that hanging there. That I'm going to talk about it because there's some interesting stuff about security that has got a vague money theme to it, but it's all about, you want to listen to this bit. It spurred me into action about security and being security conscious this week. So that's going to come up.
Okay.
And we're also going to talk a bit about holiday spending in a way. We're going to talk about getting good value, but it's in relation to something very positive. People always like to go on holiday or something a bit more uplifting. And then we're going to quickly probably touch onto something that I was asked by that chap via the chat window on T20 Investor. So I'm going to be going at lightning speed, talking way too fast, and probably getting way too overexcited about the whole stuff.
Good. Right, good. Let's get on with it.
Right, the first one. Oh, before I start this, one thing I was going to say to people, go to our YouTube channel, because I am doing videos now on a weekly basis that are roundups of topical content, so the latest headlines. We do an Instagram roundup every day of the top 3 headlines, so follow us on Instagram. Very clever, very neat, if I do say so, but it's headlines in a pictorial format, so it's a good way of consuming headlines without reading anything. And every week I do a video, 5 minutes, of me talking around some of the big stories and maybe something that's coming up the next week to look out for. So go onto YouTube, and you can find our YouTube channel via the website, and subscribe and watch it, because it's something, again, slightly different. We always like to have something different for each kind of product we do. YouTube is more about the here and now topical stuff. This podcast is evergreen, much like the site, and obviously T20 Investor is about investing, and the book, The 30-Day Money Plan, is about money saving in a very, well, not actually sorting your finances. It's not money saving, sorting your finances very quickly. Anyway, back to this podcast. One of the things I'm going to talk about first of all is investing, and it was via this chat. The question was, what do I think is the future of active investing? What's my view on it? Now, active investing is where you buy funds that are run by a fund manager, as opposed to index trackers that are typically run by a computer. So the computer just buys the shares that are in proportion to whatever the index is, like the FTSE 100. And there's loads of them. And there's been a huge movement globally for investors to buy cheap ETFs, exchange traded funds, and trackers, because they're low cost, so it doesn't eat into your returns, and they quite often outperform fund managers, the active fund managers. And the thing is, active funds are expensive. So in light of this whole flood of cheap products that are coming out there, cheap trackers, and everyone telling you to buy cheap trackers, what is my view on where the future lies for active fund management? Now, I actually believe there is a future of sorts. And the reason I say that is that, of course, ETFs are brilliant because you're getting something very, very, very cheap. And we're talking about not even, you can get them 10% of the cost of what you'd pay for an active fund manager. Now, the problem is you're only ever going to get the market. So if you're tracking the FTSE, you're only going to track the FTSE. You're never going to beat it. In fact, you're going to do marginally underperform because there's a cost, isn't there? The cost of the fund, which is why you need to keep the cost low. Of course, there's the next step where you get these, let's call them clever trackers, or they're sometimes called smart beta trackers, where they've got some quirk around them. So they might be, I don't know, let's just make it up. Rather than track all the FTSE 100, they might track just the FTSE 100 companies that have, I don't know, paying good dividends or something like that. So you're getting that there might be some nuance, and it could be value investing or something like that. So there's this whole bunch of trackers that are appearing, and I don't think it's the death knell for active fund managers. I think there's going to be a place for them, but what's going to change is that active fund managers have basically been creaming money off of everybody and their investments for decades, and they've been loving it, and they make huge profits. And now the internet has democratized investing, so people are more savvy and they can actually see how much they're being charged and actually how much they're being overcharged. So people will start to be able to compare performance and start thinking, well, we should be going maybe for passives. The problem is that it's a very easy argument to make that, oh yeah, just go for passives, but it's not quite correct, because I'm not a active investor or a passive investor, right? An 80-20 investor was all about trying to solve this problem about where the future of the industry would go. Very simply, every dog has its day, so every active fund manager will at some point outperform because of whatever he's doing. If he isn't following the herd, because what happens, they all tend to follow each other, because a fund manager is only worried about his job. He's not going to go home at night and say, oh, I did anything crazy to his wife and that's why I got sacked, because I wanted to do something a bit different with my investment strategy. His wife probably wouldn't be impressed, and losing his house or anything like that wouldn't be ideal. So what he'll do, he doesn't want to deviate from the crowd. So they all tend to copy each other, really. Now, what you're going to get is that the fund managers who outperform will deviate from the crowd. And so what you need to do is try and jump on their bandwagon when they're winning. And 80-20 Investor is all about doing that. You end up regularly reviewing. We identify those people who are winning in the current environment and likely to in the next upcoming short-term environment. And that could be the passives, that could be ETFs, that could be index trackers, but there'll be periods where index trackers will underperform and certain active managers will outperform. So where is the market going? In short, I think it's going down the route of 80-20 Investor, which is why we built it. There isn't just a plug for it. It's just saying that people will start to realise that they might move to passives, but they'll realise they'll never ever outperform. So they might have a core of passives in their portfolio, but realise if they want to try and boost returns and do a bit more, not be just beholden to what the market does, because the more people that follow that, they become the market, and therefore that actually has some negative feedback, if that makes sense, because they end up just influencing the thing they're trying to track. If they're trying to do something different, they need to be able to define who is doing well, so people will need to have an instrument or tools to do that, and that's where the things like 80-20 Investor come in. We're the only thing out there that does that at the moment, and we'll actually identify those people. So I think what will happen is that people will go, yeah, passives will become popular, and there'll be a big sort of core people who will go down that route. You hear our sponsor at the front, Money Farm. They are a slightly more intelligent version of it, because they'll choose the passives for you in a portfolio. And that's the problem. You can go to a passive, but what index do you track? Which is suitable? They can help with that. So that's why they are a slightly smarter version of it. What we're doing with 80/20 is going, right, active works in some environments, passive work in some environments. We're going to help you pick the best. So I think we're going to go down that route. And the other thing is, I think what will happen as people jump towards passives, they become too short term and they don't realise that actually long term investing, that doesn't mean holding something forever. That means being in the game of investing for long term. It becomes more important. And when you do that, that's when active managers over time can do a little bit better. So it's got to be an education piece. So that's where I think the market's going. I may be slightly on my own in some of that thinking, because I'm not screaming actives will win or passives will. I think it'll be somewhere in between. That's what tends to happen in life. So hence why 80/20 Investor was born. So that's the investing part done, Andy. That just shows you how spontaneous we are. It's not lack of content, it's spontaneous. It's spontaneous. Right.
Good.
On to the next one. This is inspired by some chaps at latestfreestuff.co.uk. Now, go and have a look at that site. The site actually appeared on Dragon's Den. I don't know if I've mentioned them at all on the podcast before. Really good bunch of guys. They came up with the idea when people give away free samples, it could be, I don't know, anything out there. Any product, could be nappies, could be cosmetics. They might give away a free sample. But what this guy came up with the idea of doing was providing a website that pulled together all those deals so consumers could just go and get the latest free stuff, which hence the name, latestfreestuff.co.uk. So go and have a look. You can get all these free samples and stuff like that. They went on Dragon's Den, they won or got backing on Dragon's Den. There is more of a story to that where they didn't eventually tie up with the Dragon, even though they were successful. They did a bit of research for PR, so that's why I'm name checking them, because I like them, they're good guys, their site is very good, go look at it, about Black Friday. And now Black Friday, if anyone knows, is an irritating American phenomena where they sell a load of stuff cheap on a particular day to try and kickstart the spending before Christmas. They don't have the same almost shopping calendar as we do, because they have what American holiday is it they have in the lead up to Christmas?
They have Thanksgiving first, so this is the lead up to that.
Yeah, and it's to kickstart people around Thanksgiving to start spending, whereas in the UK we start building up from the autumn. In America, Thanksgiving kind of gets in the way. So anyway, we've had this come over, and they were looking at the whole idea about Black Friday and about particular Amazon. Now, Amazon are being a little bit naughty, and they advertise 50% off, say, deals. They have deals that they'll say there's 50% off of this particular product, and it may be around Black Friday. And so to get consumers to buy them. And there's always this thing about events like Black Friday, when you see people fighting each other in stores, that actually the saving isn't that great. And what they found with Amazon is Amazon were overstating the scale of the saving by 10 times. So if they said it was a 50% saving, in reality it was only a 5%. And now the reason they were able to do that, because Amazon were basing it upon maybe the highest price or the recommended retail price that was stated somewhere. But what the guys at Latest Free Stuff did was take the average price that the product sold at over, say, a 2-year period, which is a much better benchmark.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what they did is they went and looked around, and they did a whole bunch of deals, and they saw there were some where they were overstating it by 10 times as much. So the moral of this story is don't get done, because don't always believe the savings you see on big sites like Amazon, not just around Black Friday. And the way to get around it is to use a site like camel.com. The UK version is uk.camelcamelcamel.com, which shows you tracks the price of any product on Amazon over a period of time, and you can see when it's a good price or when it's not based on history, and you can have email alerts. So don't be sucked into these huge savings. Check to see if they are really genuine savings. And the other one is you can use sites like flubit.com, which you can it's a site whereby you copy the URL of a product you find on Amazon, paste it into their website, and then they'll go off and 15 minutes later find you a better deal if they can, typically about 15% less. So don't be sucked in to these false savings.
Good. Don't get done. Don't get the hump. Go on to camel. Yeah, that was bad.
You should work in marketing, Andy.
It was the timing delay. It was this. it was at least 3 or 4 seconds before it even triggered, and that's no good for a joke. Right, moving on.
I don't know why I'm laughing so much. Another thing, we're going to quickly chuck this one in. There's been Martin Lewis has been banging on as well this week. He does like to bang on. And about late night emails. Have you seen it?
No.
And there's been full credit to him. Martin Lewis does some really good things, and he's set up I think it's another site that's around.
Is it Martin Lewis or is it his team of people now? Because he's pretty much a band of people. Now,
he is an army. He's an army, but yeah, I don't know if it's his idea. It might be somebody else's. But surround yourself with good people, Andy, like I do with you, and you can take credit for things they do. He's got a thing about late night emails, and there's been evidence to suggest that companies send them out in the early hours to encourage people to spend, because obviously they're tired, and particularly they reckon that you're more spontaneous at that point if you pick up your phone. And he says that people with mental health are more likely to buy as well. So that was just quite an interesting side thing of this that people like.
I have to say, from my experience as well, in a previous life, I must say, it's most definitely the more inebriated people at that time of night as well, and alcohol can slur you. I once bought a full set of golf clubs at 1:30 in the morning on Bid Up TV. True story. Unfortunately.
What spurred you on? Was it just pure alcohol?
Yeah, I was flicking through the channels and I thought, I need some golf clubs, and if I don't buy these now, I'm going to lose them. Cut to 3 days later with a very confused man and delivery driver, where I wouldn't accept delivery of these clubs, whoever had bought them, and it seems that I had bought them a few days earlier.
I can't remember if I've ever told this story on the podcast. Probably haven't. About a friend of yours as well, Andy, someone we used to work with, who did the most amazing late night inebriated purchase, whereby he woke up. He I think he went through a breakup in a relationship, but he was a really good fun guy and used to go out drinking, and he went out and got drunk, and he came down in the morning and found his credit card basically next to the computer, didn't know what he'd bought, and worked out he'd bought tickets to Mexico, and he bought to go and save turtles, when they go and protect the eggs. He didn't know why he'd done that. He was like, oh my God, I don't know why I've done that. And in the end, he went. Cut a very long story short, he never came back. He went, didn't he? And he's never come back. He now lives there. This was about 10 years ago. He's a good friend. He now lives there. He carried on saving turtles, stayed longer than he should have done, didn't come back to his job. He's now married with children, and he's in Mexico. So, hello, Dave. If you listen to this, you won't be listening because you're in Mexico. But that's probably the best story ever of somebody who did it. Went, oh my God, what have I done? I've bought plane tickets to go and save the turtles, and he did it. Changed his life. So there you go, Andy. Maybe Martin Lewis shouldn't be trying to stop people from purchasing things at night.
Okay, Damien, we're talking Burglars. You spoke about a TV programme?
Yeah. I saw an article written by a journalist who I've done some work with in the past, and I wrote to him actually, funny enough, after reading this article, because when you read something in the newspaper, and I'd like to think that the podcast inspires people to make changes to their life, and we've had emails saying people do, and I read this article and it spurred me to get a burglar alarm fitted. Now that is no mean feat, given that that's been on my to-do list for probably 2 years. And the journalist wrote an article. What he did is he invited a reformed burglar, a professional burglar, to break into his house and show him how he did it. And now this chap, I think he's got a TV programme a bit like Don't Get Done, Get Dom. It's a bit like that, but he goes round and breaks into people's houses and shows them. And I think he works for an insurance company now to do it. And he went round to this journalist's house, and the journalist clearly thought his house was very secure, and he broke into it very quickly. I think he did it in 30 seconds, which just shows how ridiculous our home security is. And the guy had double glazed and everything. So I just wanted to chuck it out there. I tweeted about it during the week, so if you look at my Twitter feed, you can find the article in question. I just wanted to quickly run through some points that they brought up on there about the guy saying it's kind of money related, because the average, I think, amount of money lost is about 700 quid in repairing locks when you have a burglary, and it's about somewhere about 3 to 5 grand in lost possessions if you get burgled and they have to be replaced. And So it's better. Prevention is always better than cure, isn't it, Andy? And
Indeed.
a couple of things this guy pointed out as a burglar. He said that burglars don't walk around with tools. They don't go armed up. They're not like you think they are in the cartoons. They are just pure opportunists, because you don't want to get stopped by the police with tools, because then they can actually get into trouble. So one of the things he just pointed out, and some people listening to this may think it's common sense, to me it wasn't. He said that he will actually improvise with things he can find around your house to break in. So for this journalist, he broke into his shed, which wasn't obviously secured, and took out a crowbar that was in there and used that to break into his house. And they said they will look for things like that to improvise, and they will break. They won't go through and pick locks. They'll just go through the windows. So you've got double glazing. He was saying how they can actually take out the double glazing glass via the frame without breaking it. And funny enough, when I had the burglar alarm fitted, the guy said that. He said, well, they don't worry about opening windows. They just go through the glass. That's how they do it. So that was one of the things he was talking about. Don't have things laying around. But one of the things the burglar actually pointed out, that he looks at the locks, and if it's dusty, covered in cobwebs, or your burglar alarm is, he said
It's obviously not being used.
he said that to the guy. He said, clearly I can see you're not using the deadlock. You're not using that alarm. Doesn't look like it's been seen much love lately. You don't use that. And the guy said, oh yeah, he doesn't really use it. And so he knows, I just kick the door, it will come in. So there were some really good tips that the guy was saying about making sure you look like the place is being serviced. One of the ones he said is, don't leave things laying around. And he looked through the person's window and said that what he loved was the guy had lined up all his keys on a hook, that you could see the family calendar, which was nicely labelled with when they were going to be in and when they were going to be out and be away. And he was like, oh, thanks for that, because I now know you're not going to be in on that time. And the keys are there, so I don't have to hunt around. And he was just saying that, and that it is funny, because we all do it. And about having our keys, he said, don't put things in. Yeah, everyone hides stuff at the bottom of the wardrobe. He said, it's the first place I go, because he wants to be in and out of the house in 3 minutes. So he will go to the bottom of the wardrobe for that shoebox with all that stuff, because that's where everybody puts it. And don't leave all your valuables like iPads laying around, because he can just see that's what they want. They want to go in. He said he doesn't want to go and nick your TV and things like that, because he wants stuff that he can just simply bung in a bag or a bed sheet that they do, and they fold them up and off they walk with it, and they want to be gone. And they said they don't necessarily case the place. If they can get in through the front and they can see it's pretty weak, they're not going to just walk around the back, because a neighbour might see them. So they're probably going to just go straight in there and then and be out in 3 minutes. And one of the things he pointed out is the idea of stealing hard drives if they see them, or laptops, and paperwork, because they can then use it to clone your ID or send you ransoms for return of some of the data, and particularly sentimental stuff for photos and things like that, which is, as this guy said it, I mean, he's a callous bloke, but he said he saw it as purely as a job, but he had no qualms with blackmailing people. So it's one of those things. Prevention is better than cure. Obviously, they talk about neighbourhood watch, getting alarms, and like you say, you can get alarmed fairly cheaply. But it spurred me on, and I just thought that it was quite a topical piece, really, given that it's the time of year, dark nights and everything, to do that. And it is money related, because you could save yourself a fortune, and it actually reduces the cost of your insurance if you have an alarm fitted. So go and get one.
It's very good what he says, because my parents have had first-hand experience of being broken in straight through the front door. None of this going around the back. They live on a busy road, so the person would have, taken some risk there. And what the person broke in with was a little bit of a fishing net that was stolen out of the garage. My dad kept some fishing nets in there for the children, and they basically wove it into a sort of improvised little hook. And then he went straight in through the letterbox, hooked the latch. The door hadn't been double locked.
Do you know what, Andy? I'm amazed.
And he stole, apparently the thief, because the police could, once they came around and checked, the thief was just looking for car keys at that point, because there was a couple of phones that he'd left, and you could see he'd gone through, like there was a pot of keys, and he was trying to find car keys. As it happens, there were only keys, like spare keys to the front and back door, and also to the garage, but he was after the car, and so they reckon he was in and out in less than 2 minutes.
I mean, if it wasn't for the fact that these people are such arseholes, I know we shouldn't swear on the podcast, because now we've made this one explicit, but they are, that is so ingenious to do what he did that ordinary people wouldn't think about turning a net into some sort of clever hook to open the door, because they could have, in fact, left and not shown any signs of raiding the place, and your parents would have been none the wiser and come back later. That is worrying. I tell you what, just to make this point a little bit light-hearted, I'll tell you a story. This is actually around burglary, but it's actually light-hearted. There's a good friend of my wife. She doesn't listen to the podcast, I don't think, and she, I don't know why, she went to work one day and then forgot to lock the front door. Actually, she forgot to shut the front door. I don't know why she did it. And she went out to work and basically got a panicked phone call from the police and saying that you've been burgled. She obviously didn't realise she'd left the front door unlocked. She returned home to see the police, and they said, "Yeah, I'm afraid it's bad news. They've tipped your place upside down." And she went in there, and they hadn't. She's just so untidy that they went as though it had been stolen. And she had to sit there and go, no one's been in here. And it was just the fact that she's so untidy, they thought she'd been burgled. And she had just genuinely left the front door unlocked. A neighbour had been concerned, seen the door unlocked, walked in, thought she'd been ransacked, phoned the police, and they came round, and she got a bit of a ticking off from the police for being untidy, for leaving the front door unlocked. But yeah, I remember talking to her because we were talking about being untidy, and then she told me that story and said, "Well, I guess I am an untidy person. I was once, my house was once mistaken for a crime scene." So anyway, the one thing I want to run off of that is, obviously we're talking about home security, but online security is one of the things is important, because if people get access to your emails, they get access to everything, don't they? And we talked about it once before about securing your email is the kind of key to your life. So if you go and listen to that podcast, but there was one tip I come across from GCHQ of all places, and they reckon if you're going to do an online password, you should have three random words in your password followed by 2 digits. Not necessarily at the end, they could be at the beginning or in between the different words, because a computer to hack that by trying to randomly generate your password would take 2 sextrillion years to crack. Now, I do not know what a sextrillion year is. It sounds good, but it's I don't know. As a mathematician, I've never heard that word, but it would take forever. Whereas if you just do one word and then a single digit afterwards, which lots of people would do, it would only take 2 hours to crack by a computer. So there you go. Wow. If you had, and they give you a tip, you should maybe do an animal, object, and then maybe a vegetable. So a bit like that game you used to play as a kid, where you used to have to try and name what you were thinking of. An animal, object, and a vegetable, 3 random words followed by or preceded by 2 letters, and it will make your password so secure that even GCHQ would like it. And if you want to check the password, you can, the security level, go to howsecureismypassword.net, and they will tell you. There you go.
Which handily is run by a load of crooks who just want your password.
A load of scammers. Right, that I did say something would have to give, because I was cramming this podcast full of stuff. So the bits about a bit of travel will probably roll over to next week, but that's okay. A bit of a teaser. I just need to remember that I've said that now.
Good stuff, Damien. Enjoyed it as always. If you want to get in touch with Damien, you can. As always, it's at Money to the Masses with a number 2, or you can contact Damien directly via the podcast email address, which is podcast@moneytothemasses.com. Damien, I did that so seamlessly. It seems I need a 2-week rest to really get that nailed down.
I think you did, Andy. I will admit I switched off, so I didn't check that you said the right things, but I think you did. Yeah. Of course, don't forget to review the podcast, because we need those reviews. It pushes us up the iTunes charts, which helps us get even more listeners and reach more people. I don't know the exact way their algorithm works, or the magic behind the iTunes chart, but it seems to be the more downloads and the more reviews you get. And also, share everything we do. People don't share enough. Share the stuff we do on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and the podcast. Tell people, because everyone who gets in touch says they love the podcast, and they missed us, Andy, when we weren't around. So that's quite nice.
Good stuff, Damien. Enjoyed it as always. Until next time.
Until next week, Andy.
Don't forget to claim your free copy of Damien's best-selling book, The 30-Day Money Plan. Sort your finances in just 5 minutes a day, worth $4.99. Just go to moneytothemasses.com/podcast to find out how.